I'm up next again for aligning the commercial, government, and research. And we're going to go through this presentation. I spent some of the time in that room. I didn't spend the entire time, but this is a key issue to me because I think we have three different vectors that are not aligning with each other. So one of the things that this group talked about is the valley of death, of trying to get things from fundamental science to production, and that there's really a mismatch of trying to get through this valley of death. And I personally think there's a stronger mismatch that some of the fundamental research is not in the right direction. I think the universities are also, that Martin said, we're not getting the right things. We need to just do the basic work. But also there is this whole thing of saying, okay, we've got some good research, we've got some next thing. How do we actually turn this into something that customers can use? And that's all about the engineering, simulation, food chain. And how do we actually get so that the research of new ideas, new technologies, new approaches can actually end up leading to innovation? And it has to go through several different steps with several different players, starting with the university and government labs, moving on to independent software vendors, moving on to engineering consulting services, and then eventually to end users being able to take advantage. So what the goal is try to influence how fast the key developments can flow through this chain. So what we want to do is try to have a vision which will improve the speed from basic research to innovation, whether that research comes from the government or it comes from universities themselves. One of the things that we shared, and this is part of the presentation time that we're in there, is the relationship between the government, the commercial software world, and the research world changed somewhere. In the early 80s, the CAE vendors interacted exceptionally well with all the research capabilities. It was a great relationship. In the mid-80s to late 90s, it changed to the point where not only was it not efficient, it became almost adversarial. And they became misaligned. So everybody's doing their own thing because they don't think the other stuff they can trust, they don't think the other stuff can apply to them. Or they don't know it's there because they've become so disconnected, they're not even aware that it exists. We had a presentation from Jesse Citizen from the DoD, and he gave us a complete representation of what they were doing and how they were approaching modeling and simulation. And then he heard the presentations about what the commercial people were doing, and it was like Greek and Latin. Nobody had a clue what the others were talking about. So one of the things that became the key issue in relationships is it's all become about the IP. So one of the key things they said is don't start with an idea, figure out how the IP is going to flow through the entire process before you start activating that it might flow. There was the Bayh-Dole Act, which was supposed to improve and smooth the flow of IP. The net effect was it confused the flow of IP to the point where those who are doing the research believe the IP belongs to them, but those who are funding the research believe the IP should belong to them because they paid for it. And there's a fundamental mismatch. And so what happens is there's a lot of research that goes on that isn't being done by these universities because if a company really wants to own the IP, they don't want to have an IP war, so they're not going to fund the university to do it. And this has actually become a big issue at major universities. Other challenges along the chain. The front of the chain, the people doing research, they have no incentive to carry the deliverables further. They're publishing papers. That's their goal. Their goal is to publish papers. We need to publish 3 more papers. Let's publish 6 more. And it has nothing to do about whether anybody actually uses it. The middle of the chain doesn't have the inclination or the resources to try to figure out how to make it work. They're trying to make money. And so the IP rights can block the moving along the chain. So that what we need to do in GNU is not an IP model that works for software vendors. I don't know what the acronym stands for. Yeah. Yeah, the GNU public license, yes. The examples of the current state are we have the NSF ERC program, which has a huge, heavy administration burden. So actually getting involved in that is very complicated. The SBIR plan for doing small business innovative research, there has to be a commercialization plan. Most of the people applying for these grants don't understand how to do marketing and commercialization, yet the requirement of doing the SBIR is to have a commercialization plan. Having been involved personally with some companies who did SBIRs, the interesting thing is there's no audit afterwards if the SBIR, if the commercialization plan is achieved or even attempted. There just has to be a plan. So this also shows the difference between an understanding of what a commercialization plan really means. The DOE, they solicit proposals to commercialize the codes they've developed. However, the codes tend to be not general enough or they don't address customer needs. They're very specific to what the DOE needed. So it isn't as easy as let's take this out and sell this to 4,000 companies because there's only maybe 3 in the world that want to use that. So it's not as easy as let's just go ahead and take this technology and commercialize it. So what we want to do is motivate responsibilities and get people involved early along the chain so that all the stakeholders throughout the chain have skin in the game and work together. So some pre-competitive consortia of the idea where the end user has access to the product features and adapted to the needs and help drive the requirements. What are we doing this research for? And the ISV learn about the needs, and the government leverages funding multiplier to get the research when there's core research that needs to be done. So the recommendations from a working group, from this working group, is for models to move along chains to study the barriers and come up with some proposals to overcome the barriers and to smoothen the path. And to actually inventory the current mechanisms for cooperation and study ongoing models. There's some good models going on at Fraunhofer, there's the Goalie model, and what the DOE is trying to do, to study those. And some key takeaways is the software vendors are critical to the chain and must be on board. Part of it is the software vendors have decided that don't have the confidence in this mechanism anymore. They need to get back engaged with the research and with the government. The research and the government aren't going to be looking to engage. The engagement has to come from the commercial side. And we need to educate the researchers about what are good licensing models, and we need to trust in the collaboration. We need to educate the researchers on what's the real research we need to have done, rather than letting them pick PhDs that sound cool. We need to actually say, no, we need some work done in these 5 areas. And at that point, ready for some questions. Andreas.
I know it sounds everything very negative between collaboration of government and etc., but there are some bright examples, like LS Dyna was developed at national labs. It used to be research code. Now it's the most popular code to do crashworthiness all over the world in automotive industry. So DOE is trying and sometimes successful.
I think that's correct, but LS Dyna is one of those that was in the early 80s. That's one of those that was in the time of collaboration. Yes, there are good examples, and we need to study those examples, and we need to open up that channel again.
Just a quick comment that I think it's worth also taking a look at how the Europeans do this through things like Crescendo and Mosaic.
Go ahead, Bob.
So I had one question as I was looking at that one, because we had a couple of things in 2 of the other presentations where we said the software is too general purpose, and here you said it's too specific when it came to the DOE stuff and there's not a big enough market. So one of the things we have to do here is help the researchers understand how to make it more general but not too general.
I think that's absolutely correct. And there is this issue about what is it that the audience wants and to drive that from the needs. But if we look at what the labs are doing, it's kind of like it's a general purpose solution on a very complex physics that doesn't apply for something else. But oh, by the way, it's still too general purpose for anyone who doesn't want to use it. But it's of a specific need that only applies to 6 companies in the world. Evan?
One of the tragedies that I've sort of been noticing recently, it was on your slide where where researchers end up abandoning the work they've done after they get their degree. They publish a paper, but then we never see the software, we never see the work again because they go get a job in industry. Particular example I've had recently is trying to find code to do electrochemical dissolution, which is essentially corrosion. You'd think there would be some good software out there to do that. And in fact, there is. From what I can tell, there's 2 companies in the world that do it, and it just seems very frustrating that I go out and I looked at the research papers, and I was able to find tremendous numbers of papers researching how to do this, and that apparently they developed software to do it, but their software is gone. So one of these questions is, how do you bridge this gap between what's happening at the university and make that more available? Because we need that in order to really democratize things like this. If only a few people have it, products like ASSESS, they're not inexpensive.
And I think we have a two-sided issue to the point you raised, and I agree with you. One side is there's research being done on things that are already available commercially, so why are we doing that research? And the other side is there's research being done that's excellent, but never sees the light of day in anything commercial. And so we have to take better advantage of the research that is available. We went blackout. We have to take better advantage of the research that is available and do a better job of getting the research focused in the right places. And we are, looks like something came back alive. Just give me a second. Any other questions, or are we waiting for Brad to work?
Did you look at other models? For instance, outside of CAD, did you look at the pharmaceutical industry? Or did you look at how research is done in EMEA or in the Far East, in China or Japan?
At this point in time, no. There was instead a conclusion that we should look at that.
So is your conclusion that even in other industries, the model is broken?
Our conclusion is we don't know enough about the other industries. We do know that the model is broken in the engineering software industry, especially in the simulation software industry. We don't know about the other industries, and we need to look at those to find out if they have an answer or if they're broken.
If they have a better model.
If they have a better model. That's correct. And we don't have the answer to that right now. There is a general consensus that Europe's figured out how to do this a little bit better than we have, from Andreas's comment. There is a general consensus that Japan's trying to figure out how to do it better, but Europe actually has kind of figured out something on the engineering software side that's much better than what we're doing.
Was this taped so you can get more time?
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, I'm still within my time limit. Okay, Jack?
It would be useful to look at the process control industry because their product development process includes the creation of a simulator that is the main part of their product.
Right.
So they, in fact, are much more aware of the benefits and the fears of simulation than most engineering organizations.
I think you're exactly right. And one of the things that this group did focus on, the working group that did discuss this, was the first thing we had to do, and one of the reasons why it came across so negatives, we had to admit we've got a problem. So we had to admit that we're heading in 3 different directions rather than one direction, and we're not going to get there by going in 3 different directions. So that then the conclusion is we need to see, just has someone else figured it out in different industries, different countries, different continents. And so yes, the control systems industry is something we need to look at. Lots of different industries. We need we need to wake up and look at this totally differently and say, how do we want to work together and rethink the models, because the current ones don't work. And it's as basic as the graduating engineers don't have the skill sets that we need to do simulation on a day-to-day basis. The research we need to be done is, the research that's really good we're not getting a hold of. The research that we need done isn't getting done.